All right. Well, you've heard from the three of us telling you what specifically subscribers and consortia are thinking and want. Well, now you're going to hear from one of them. McKee, she is the Program Officer for Resource Sharing at GWILA, or the Greater Western Library Alliance. Anne received her MLS from Indiana University, Bloomington, has had a very diverse career in librarianship. She has been an academic librarian, a sales rep for 2 subscription agencies, and now a consortium officer for the past 12 years. A former president of NASIG, Anne is on the Serials Review editorial board, 3 publisher vendor library advisory boards, and strives to balance a busy career with an even busier family, including a husband, 1 teenager, 1 tween, 2 dogs, and a host family for a teacher from Hubei province, China. Anne is probably the only person you'll meet with both an undergrad and an MLS in library science. Anne.
Okay, how many of you knew that there were undergraduate majors in library science? Oh, I'm so proud of you. I really am probably about the only one you'll ever meet. And I've had lots of library science graduate students ask me about that, and I'm not so sure I would probably recommend library science as an undergraduate. I think you need to specialize in a subject, particularly if you want to work in academia. But it was good for me, and I loved where I went to school. Okay, one of my biggest things I want to impart to you and tattoo it on your forehead is that all consortia are not alike. Nothing gets me teed off more than have one consortia person speak for the entire industry, because they speak for that consortia. So looking upon that, I will be speaking from my frame of reference as working with GWILA and also working as a vendor. But I'm speaking really from my aspect. A few years ago, I was asked to write an article for a journal about consortia negotiations, so I had to dredge a little bit of this up from memory. Believe it or not, consortia have been around for over 100 years. The current configuration of what you might know as a library consortia really started in the late 60s, and it was really, you hear resource sharing a lot. There's probably still not true resource sharing, but back in the 60s, resource sharing was they wanted to be able to do interlibrary loan with other libraries and not have to pay ILL fees. Consortia really started taking off in the late 80s, early 90s. And for you millennials out there, I'm talking about the 1980s, 1990s, when concerns over journal tiered pricing started. And then the double-digit annual price increase started, and budgets started going south. The next big shift pretty much moved from a volunteer to a paid level back in the 90s. There are still many consortia out there. It's strictly volunteer. One institution steps up and becomes the invoicing arm, the marketing arm of a consortia, but many of the larger consortia now all have paid staff. I'm not talking about a lot of staff, and I'm not talking about the former networks. I'm talking about consortia. In my institution, we have 2.5. And we just got the half. So we were really excited about that. So, I can cut a check, or my executive director can cut a check, but that's really about it. Okay, there's lots of different consortia out there. So I thought I'd put some of them up there for you so you kind of understand where we're talking from. All different kinds. One of them is the institutional context. Probably one of the best known ones is the CIC, Committee on Institutional Cooperation, which is the Big Ten institutions plus University of Chicago. Then there might be a shared consortial focus, those that gather together because of disciplines, law, health, health sciences, public libraries, etc. Then there's the tiered consortia. You're looking at research institutions, or are they 4 years undergraduate? Are they community colleges? There's the geographic consortia, national, regional, and state. And I would like to say most states do have a statewide consortia for their state-supported institutions. Then there might be a consortia based around funding agencies. Are they state supported? Are they privates? The Ivies have had some of the oldest consortia around. And then there's under the funding agency does the consortia retain a percentage of the discount, and that's how they make their ability to pay their 2.5 staff, or is it annual dues? And then the last one, and probably the most difficult one, is the multi-type, just because, not all consortia are alike, but at least in some of the other ones, they're kind of tiered together. You understand, in multi-type, they go from a research institution all the way down to K through 12, and it's very hard to try to work with publishers and with aggregators, trying to get pricing that works for all. It can be very difficult. I always think that consortia people who work for multi-types have their own special halo in heaven. And then, frankly, there are a few consortia out there that are very proud and actually do brag about the fact that they were formed simply as a buying club. They wanted to see the best discounts they could get. Neural is one, for instance, if you're all familiar with Neural. They're very northeastern regional libraries, right? They're very proud of the fact that they're a buying club. And, of course, if you know anything about consortia, you know that they overlap. In our institution, consortium of 32 libraries, I think all but one have at least another one, and they're usually in like 3. So they all overlap, sometimes because the state requires them, but they want to be then in another consortium more along their research levels. So it can be very confusing sometimes. And that's why consortia hire staff, so they don't have to go through the headache of working with all these different types, that they want the staff to be able to explain to the publishers and content providers. So let me tell you a little bit about GWLA, Greater Western Library Alliance. We're 32 academic research libraries in 16 states. We stretch from Illinois. We have 2 institutions east of the Mississippi, all the way to Hawaii, from the state of Washington down to Texas. We are all of the 32 institutions are Carnegie classification RUVH. And are you all, I'm using a lot of library lingo, so you know what RUVH means, or RUH. We have a combined FTE that frankly makes publishers and aggregators drool, 850,000. We have the largest institution of higher learning in the United States in Anguilla. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are solely funded by annual member dues. Some consortia do retain a percentage of the discount, or they are done by annual dues, but then for every agreement they might sign, they might request that the library still kick in a certain percentage at that point. We are solely by annual membership dues, and I'll tell you, they're cheap, $11,300 a year. For that, you buy my executive director, Joni Blake, and you buy me. 26 of our 32 members are former nostalgic schools. They're now Association of Public and Land-Grant Colleges. Nostalgic was much easier to say than apoplectic. 25 members are of ARL, Association of Research Libraries. We're very proud of the fact that 13 members of Anguilla are in the Association of American Universities, and 8 members are in the Hathi Trust. So, kind of what do I do? And I don't just negotiate with public, work a lot in Anguilla on other research sharing. But this is kind of the things that we do that I think most consortia offer some of these. Some might offer services, some might offer less. I handle the negotiations for both the discounting pricing and the licensing of acquired content. I always like to point out, and this is different from consortia as well, but I always like to point out I am the objective bystander. The 32 members tell me what they want, what they don't want, what they won't do. I go to publishers or content providers and tell them that. I make no recommendations, unless it's something about a license, if I think it's something in the license that is not either correct for our state institutions or won't fly. I don't judge content. I don't do any of that. In fiscal year 2010, our members spent $33 million-ish just through the Gwilla agreements. This is not the other consortia that they work in. It's not the cereals or books that they order on their own. Just through the Gwilla institutions, they spent $33 million-ish. We realized a cost avoidance for our members of $55 million off of list price. And let's be frank, we know list price is just really a shot in the air, hoping that the arrow lands someplace. We understand list price can be inflated somewhat. We, Gwilla, can handle invoicing, but cash flow is paramount. And let me explain that to you. We are funded solely by our members, $11,300 a year. We do not have a shared acquisitions pool like other consortia might have. We stretch over 16 states. Some of those states do not allow money to cross state lines. So what we pay out, we have to get from the members. And I'll talk about this in a few minutes. So these 30 days net invoicing won't work unless we have the pricing a long time in advance of when the invoices actually due. We have to invoice our members and get that money for them, and it's just a pass-through from us. We also like to extend to non-members in our member states publisher content agreements if the publisher allows. And why we do that is our 32 members tend to be the flagship research institutions in their state. And so if they opt to come to Gwilla for a Springer deal, for instance, that FTE is usually then removed, and the other smaller state colleges can't rely on that FTE to lower their costs for them. So if the publisher allows it, we like to extend it to non-members so those smaller institutions in the state can have access to your content. You extend the market to them, and it's frankly business that you would never be able to sell to the library direct anyway. So this is kind of what we kind of look at when we work with what content, e-journals, e-books, whatever. Content is absolutely paramount. We look at impact factors or what the accrediting bodies for some of our disciplines say we have to have. That is the very first thing. The content has to be good. The content doesn't have to come from a large publisher. We work with some very small publishers. We, frankly, really love working with small society, nonprofit publishers, but it needs to have impact factor on it. We need multiple modes or layers of discoverability. We want the small platforms where you kind of luck into them, we need that crawled through everything. Google Scholar, let's face it, my nieces and nephews are through college now. My kids are yet to be in school, but some of them never went to the university library the 4 years they were there. It just kills their librarian aunt, but that's what happened. We look at the curriculum and the content. Does this content speak to any of the disciplines or majors or minors, whether it's large or small? We have some very small social sciences, humanities agreements, and then we have very large STEM. More than anything, we want fair pricing. I can talk profit and loss with the best of you. I can talk profit margins. I know all of that. And we understand that publishers and content providers need to make a profit to stay in business. Otherwise, the content we need from you would not be available. We understand that. We just want fair pricing. We don't want double-digit price increases every single year. I have been in this business for 20 years, and we've seen double-digit price increases almost every year. We want library-friendly and realistic licenses. They have to discuss fair use. They have to include ILL. And ILL, not in you print off an ILL and hand it to somebody. None of my 32 members do that. They all deliver electronically to the desktop. So it has to be ILL in the prevailing technology of the day. They have to allow walk-ins, distant learners. And the newest push now is alumni. We would really like to see alumni be able to get access to this content. This is where I do draw a line in the sand. We do have things that must be in contracts and things that cannot be in contracts, or the deal does not go through. Let me explain one of them. This was a small publisher that worked mostly with federal libraries and decided to try to branch out in the academic market. And I always ask to see the license first, because I can always then kind of gauge, if we're going to maybe be able to do something, or if we want to do something, how long it's going to be to try to fit the license to our needs. And in their licensing, and one that they would not budge on, is they wanted each academic library to require one person from that library to stand by the computers to ensure that no one accessing this database was a state or federal employee. We didn't sign with that publisher. After countless negotiations, they would not understand. We did not sign, and as of today, I don't think they have gone into one academic library yet. While we like library-friendly and realistic licenses, we like CIRU even better. Do you all know CIRU? Shared Electronic Resources Understanding. It is a fantastic document out there. Actually, one of the former presidents of SSP was one of the main founders of CIRU. And what this is, it's a list of shared understanding of what the library or consortia and what the publisher agree to do. And it's that. We don't sign anything. You just go to their website. The publisher and the consortium or library has to sign up to be a member of CIRU. It's free. It's through NISO. And then you can invoke CIRU. So none of this going through multiple layers of each university library's legal counsel. In some cases, I go through the university library and then to the state controller for licensing. This is just something, it's about 2 paragraphs long. We love it. So for the smaller publishers out there, if they don't know about CIRU, I'm more than happy to point you in the way to what to do. CIRU right now is only for journals, but Judy Luther told me a couple of weeks ago that ebooks CIRU is forthcoming, and we are ecstatic about it. We have invoked CIRU either 2 or 3 times in our agreements. We love it. We needed an abundance of invoicing options. And what I mean by that is we need to be able to pay over time because of the fiscal crisis that we have so much. If that's what the university wants. We need to be able to use subscription agents if we absolutely have to. This net plus 30 will never work in any consortium. I don't care what consortium is out there. That just is not doable. So we need very innovative. And we have had some really interesting ways that smaller publishers have been willing to work with us on invoicing. Another thing I'd like to remind everyone is libraries have very long memories. And those publishers that, for instance, a few years ago during the major fiscal crisis, those publishers that didn't raise rates or were willing to wait to invoice until after the next fiscal year, we remember and we're very loyal to them. One thing that I'm very big on in working with agencies and with publishers is that we want to form a partnership. We don't look on the for-profit side or even the publishing side, profit or nonprofit, as adversarial relationship. We don't want that. Maybe it's coming from my NASIG background, but we like forming partnerships. And then, did I mention that content is really, really important? So, a few years ago, I had to do another talk at a conference, and I found this David Simmons quote, which I love. And looking at it again in the last couple of days, I thought, well, this really kind of fits publishers, too. So I'll end with this. Consortia and publishers have a culture which is chaotic, results-oriented, and calendar-aware. They need people who are flexible, multi-talented, task-oriented, and lifelong learners. They need a sense of understanding and a connection to the purpose of the cooperative. And above all else, they need a sense of humor. And I would probably add one more and a big glass of wine at the end of it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Now I want to open it up to questions from anybody in the audience of any of the panelists. So raise your hand or you can go to the microphone. Do you have anything? Okay, well, first.
Hi, I'm Barbara Myers-Ford. I have a question for two-parter on archiving. You said that as long as the library subscribes to your aggregation, they have access to the archives. What happens when the library stops? Do you at least allow them access to the years they did subscribe to?
Actually, really good question. I made a mistake. It's perpetual access to the archives.
Good. That was part B. What
Yes.
have you done with regards to perpetual access?
Yeah, it's been, we started the model. Let me clear about that. Again, the years you subscribe are perpetual. So you keep the content you paid for. And the access to the archives is not perpetual. So yes, you have access until you keep paying for the subscription. So at the end of the contract, you don't want to renew. We just provide with the content of everything that you paid for.
Jose, is the back file then available for a price or not?
Not currently, but we're working on
The archives.
offering. Yeah.
Anybody else? I have just a couple. Since sorry.
Just a quick question on using archive services such as Box and Portico.
That's in our license.
For both, or just to be a part of one?
The way I've written the license is and or, so they have to be at least one. Many of our libraries are only Portico, some are only locks. We really prefer locks over clocks. But
For like an on-site?
right, but some are both. So but at least the Guilla's licenses, all of them have to be either Portico or clocks locks.
And I'll echo that. Especially internationally, a lot of the that we deal with require as part of a subscription that members publishers belong to any of the archiving services like Portico or Clocks. So,
And we actually, one of our institutions had to drop out of a deal, and the contract stated that locks, but the publisher at that point actually wasn't participating. So I'm happy to talk with you more about that, but they're now participating. So.
You mentioned that next year's looking dire, and so I wondered if anyone has any advice for the small publishers. Should we just brace ourselves?
Next year's like, who said you?
I did.
Why do you say that?
Well, I said it. In the United States, as an example, you have many institutions, many consortia. Even on our last iteration of this panel, you had California saying that the budgets are being cut 30%. So if that's not dire for, especially the small publishers, when Elsevier and some of the other big publishers are taking the majority of the library budget, I don't know what is.
Yeah, let me address that, because I think one of the advantages of another advantage of being in global consortia is like owning a diverse mutual fund portfolio, where one part of the world is undergoing a huge budget crunch, another part of the world is is doing quite well. So although we're in kind of a global recession, which seems to go up and go down depending on the day, there's still parts of the world where library budgets, are fine. Much of Asia, Australia, you just have to. It's just an advantage. That's another reason for small publishers to
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
I mean, I did say parts of the world are growing. I said in the United States specifically, we're seeing some challenges. I mean, it's not across the board. I mean, it's exactly what Tom says and what I said, which is if you have to be in multiple channels to really be diversified, so that if the United States is down one year, the Middle East is up and shaking her head, I can say. Go ahead. Robert?
Question for Tom and Jose. In parts of the world where print is so pervasive, like Japan and in other countries, how do you handle print if you're a multi-publisher electronic?
Yeah, it's just been on my radar recently. Consortia deals, the bottom line of global consortia deals is electronic access. I mean, that was at the beginning of my presentation. You try to offer, in some cases, deep discount pricing can be a corollary of doing an all electronic access deal, or you have pricing that perhaps acknowledges that with deep discount pricing. By that I mean there was an Indian consortium I know we made an offer to, where of the 20 members, 15 of them didn't have access to the internet. But we made a deal anyway because over time they were going to get access to the internet. But we built that into the pricing. So you have to have deep discount print. It's ideal to have deep discount print pricing. Having said that, of my 21 publishers in ISPEG, I would say half of them don't have deep discount print pricing, at least, and some of them don't. Their publishers are quickly moving away from print, and there's a tension there. So one of the 21 publishers is moving away from print, and starting in January 2013, you can only buy print on demand. So there's a tension there. I think they're walking away from some of that. Okay.
Can I? While other parts of the world, print is still very pervasive. I did want to make a plea that in the United States, and once again, I'm speaking only for 32 research libraries, these libraries have been told they will no longer get any kind of funding for any more additions to the library. They're taking parts of the library over to put other things in, and so they need shelf space. And so our institutions, many of them, have gone to e-only, and not that. Some of them have even made the decision, if it's not available in electronic, they will not purchase the book and or the journal. It is e or nothing. If the president of the university contacts them and said, I really want you to order this book, if it's not in e format, they will not do that because of shelving concerns.
Yeah, I think it's something important to say, like Tom was saying also, is about the print in certain countries where it's even by government regulation, you need to have print. So I know that in several countries in Latin America and some countries in Asia where the print is still the preferred format. So I think one of the pricing models that we have, even with ALJC, we need to rethink that format, that pricing, because it has to be flexible to address those needs. And yes, out of the 47 publishers, there are a few that are thinking getting rid of the print by 2014. And well, it's still a couple of years away, but the trend that we see in certain countries where the print is still demanded is still going to be needed in 2014. So maybe they'll have to extend it or do something print on demand, but they're going to have to do an alternative choice to those consortia.
We've also, for the a lot of parts of the world, of course, deep discount print is one of the pervasive ways of doing that. But we've also accomplished it by sending CDs of the content, because it's not. Sometimes it's not really the print. It's just they have to have, by law or other, a physical manifestation of the product to show that there's no graft or
Even taxes.
Exactly. So sending a CD seems to accomplish that in some instances. And then, of course, pricing. The one way to combat that, even though the preferred modality is print, if you price it the right way, sometimes the budgets talk. So.
Yeah, in some countries you pay for print you don't pay any taxes because it's considered a different kind of material. But once you go electronic, you pay 20% import tax. So some publishers, what they do is they charge for the print, and although they're charging for the electronic, but that's the way they state it on the license, and they're giving away the electronic. So they avoid that additional 20% because for academic institutions, that's a cost.
Could we hear just a wee bit of anecdote about what did not work in the Dragonfly Ventures in China and Hong Kong? Was it premature? What were factors?
There's someone from Highwire here, so I value the relationship I have with Highwire. And they're good. I don't mean to be. I think the Highwire. There's a debate on what on the 2006 initiative from Highwire that a previous member of Highwire and I have had going on over the years. That's now 6 years on why it worked and why it didn't work. I was at Sage at the time, and interestingly enough, we started the negotiations with China at the exact same time. As a matter of fact, Highwire sponsored a trip to China, an academic tour to China that I was on, and that kind of launched, ironically, both the Sage initiative and the Highwire initiative. My argument, I want to stress, it's my interpretation of why it didn't work. It was because it wasn't priced correctly. The Sage pricing was significantly discounted more than the Highwire journals were discounted. That's my interpretation. I know the person that used to be at Highwire thinks it was who they were talking to versus who Sage was talking to, which probably plays into it. That's important. But I think pricing is so important with a consortium deal. Going back to the partnership thing that Ann talked about, I sincerely believe this, that working with library consortia is a win-win situation. I want them to feel happy about the deal. I want it to be a long-term deal, and so much of that is pricing, And so you're trying to come up with a price that the publishers like and that the consortia want, and I think that's why it didn't work. I think Hong Kong was the same thing. It wasn't, by the way, that wasn't Highwire. That was another sales person representing them. I don't think they priced it correctly. So
I'll also echo something that you brought up, which is, consortia have memory, as Ann said, and they also have the luxury of having pricing from a wide, disparate amount of publishers. And so a lot of the consortia we deal with, they have an idea of what a journal or a book should cost on average for their consortium. And if you become a partner with that consortium, ask them, in certain ways, what it is that they have as a kind of a benchmark, and then figure out, does that work with you, and how you can manipulate your pricing and or your offering to fit that kind of modality. I saw another hand up.
Christine Randall, I was just wondering on the pricing question, do you feel consortia are cognizant of the fact that sometimes the small publishers, there's a smaller portfolio, the prices may be less, there's just less kind of fat in there to cut, or do they truly look at, these folks discounted 30%, we should get 30% across the board, or do they look at a percentage, or do they look at the kind of starting point of the prices, you know what I'm saying?
When I say win-win situation, from the publisher's viewpoint, you're pricing. You have this pricing at a very deep discount for people that would never purchase it otherwise. So by that, it's a win for the publisher. You're not going to get. I mean, if a library has a total subscription budget of $50,000, then you can't take up 25% of their budget with your small collection. And some libraries actually have that. So you have to look at it that way. And that's China all over the place. I mean, those are that's money you would not get otherwise. And to some extent, even more importantly, it's access and usage statistics you wouldn't get otherwise. Right. So I think I would flip it on the publisher's side. They have to be. It's the publishers that have to be educated to the fact these people just don't have, you're getting access from people that just don't have the budget of a Stanford or a Harvard or even the members of Gwilla, some members of Gwilla. No?
And I'll echo something I believe that you said, which was, usage is kind of one of the keys. Because with usage, it drives impact factors and it adds value to your content, and that ultimately will sell in future years. So you got to think also long term about what your pricing and your strategies are for getting into whether it's individual or consortiums. Kim.
Kim Steinley, Duke Press. So to talk a little bit about price increases and thinking about what you were just saying, David, thinking about where you start your price. I think one of the challenges is if you start it too low, price increases, okay, maybe they need to happen, but they have to be limited. But as a small publisher, maybe not as small as some, I think that one of the challenges is if you mess up in the beginning, you have a really hard time making that correction. So I wonder if you all could talk a little bit about price increases.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you. I think it's the pricing from the beginning that matters the most. Although, I mean, in different models that we have and we presented here is that you have a framework. And I think that there's a lot of room for improvement on the pricing to give certain guidelines. And like Tom said, if you go to an institution which doesn't have any content, maybe you manage it as a tier priced. Or if they already have the content, you base it on the spend. But again, the pricing, averages when Ann also says double digit, our experience is that they'd like to see it more in the 5% growth. Of course, they would like to have no growth. But the truth of the fact is that content keeps growing, information keeps growing, and someone needs to publish that. So with the price increases, it covers for that growth. But again, it's stating the right price from the beginning and just being fair. And what Ann also said, I think also a lot of customers appreciate having a fair price.
And I'll dispute a little bit of what you just said. 5%, we will not sign a license anymore with 5% increases. I can barely get 3. Ideally it would be 0, but 1 to 2 is really when we're renegotiating packages. And you have to understand, if you look at the geographic area, we're the ones that was hit the worst during the big fall of September 2008. And we're the ones that are still in there. We had number 1 and 2 in the rate of foreclosure and all that. So our institutions are really hurting. And so price increase is a very sore subject when you talk to librarians.
I'll also kind of give my little spin on this. Yes, I mean, sometimes, as Tom mentioned, you have to price it in such a way to be aggressive, possibly to get into an institution or a consortia, rather than forego any revenue from that customer. At the end of the day, I still go back to usage. So, if you have a trusted and talented partner, agent, whatever channel partner you're using to get into that consortia, use the statistics and the usage to alter the paradigm for the buyer. So, in other words, it really doesn't matter what you think your content is worth to some degree. It's what the buyer thinks the content is worth. And you could want $1 million for your content, but if nobody's using it, more than likely it may be this year, next year, or the year after, they're going to cancel your content. So,
and when all things are equal, the final question is usage. And I hear that so much from my 32 CD people, is the usage is just not there. So one thing that really works well, if you walk into a library or walk into a consortium and show the statistics, show the usage, show the turnaways, if it's like simultaneous users. That is the biggest thing libraries want to see from day one. That is something that will get your second foot in the door. If you could show us that the stats are there and that usage is really high.
Yeah, great.
I'm Greg Walker from Rockefeller University Press. I'm just wondering, I was thinking one of the keywords for Commons Mobile. Do you, this is for all three panels, do you expect, as a consortia or customers consortia, expect mobile access to be part of licenses, so apps, mobile optimized sites, tablet-ready sites? Do you expect it, and are you getting that from publishers? Are they including that? Are they technologically, small publishers, is it technologically feasible for them to include access, authenticate these devices in their access control systems? And from a business model standpoint, are they willing to do that?
Do you want me to take it first, or? We are getting that now from the smaller publishers. That's interesting. Some of those we haven't really worked with smaller publishers that much in the whole mobile because those haven't come up for renegotiations yet. But what we want is vendor neutral, platform neutral. Probably the worst thing you could do is to say that it can only work on a Kindle, for instance, because we've got as many students as there are out there, they've got as many different e-readers. So we want something that is platform neutral, mobile neutral. And we are getting those. So.
I'm not sure. I look at more licenses than I want to, really. But I'm not sure I've seen that in a license yet, that a requirement for mobile. Although your question was, do I expect it? Yeah, I think I do. I do know that some of my small publishers have been doing that recently, and they've been surprised by the huge demand that they have seen, especially for iPad apps and for videos and things like that. So they were surprised. Some of them had done some iPhone stuff or some smartphone stuff, and the demand wasn't that great. But somehow, I think with the advent of the iPad and the Kindle, it has all of a sudden it's exceeded their expectations by the ones that have gotten involved in it by far. But that's kind of individual demand. It hasn't. I don't recall seeing that in a consortium negotiation yet. But.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I haven't seen that, nor has it been really a requirement. I would argue that having a mobile app, just going back to my beating the drum on usage, it all is about access to content, and the more access you can provide it, the more usage you're going to have, and the better your value proposition. To Kim's point, that's one way to be able to raise prices. I think we may have time for one more if there's any. If not, anybody. Well, I wanted to thank our three panelists and the